Video that some people have been looking forward to and some people have been dreading. We're going to compare the Trijicon ACOG TA3 scope to one of the TA3 style replicas from Canis Latrans of China. These are also sold by several other makers and sellers on the airsoft market here in the United States. Worldwide users, though, you're going to see these things on regular military stuff worldwide. However, in Asia, these are primarily sold for the sporting market, not the military market. This is an original ACOG based on the serial number, which will be marked on the front and the rear portion right here. I've decided to obscure that in the video. This one, best I can tell, dates to the mid to late 1990s. What you can see is that over time, this little fiber optic cable housing here has deteriorated a bit from exposure to the elements. It's not badly scratched up. It's never been in combat, but it didn't age all that well. And in not aging all that well, we get a little cracking, but it actually has not broken the seal up here. There's a tritium element inside which will illuminate the red chevron reticle no matter what. Now in newer models you can also get a green one. On the airsoft and the Chinese replica or versions, depending on how you want to put it, you can have electric illumination. You'll have the fiber optic. You will not have tritium on there. Even though it is marked as it has tritium, it will not be included. Now, in comparing some things, you can be taken on a fake. Okay, it is possible to get taken on a fake. One, the fakes are pretty good quality, okay? And I would say it's not horribly damaging to the Trijicon company that these fakes are on the market, because a lot of times somebody sees one and uses it and says, you know, I really like this design of scope, it's unique, it's very durable, it's very strong, the housings between the real and the fake are very, very similar. There's actually some minor parts interchangeability between the two, but they would say, hey, you know, I think it's time to pay for the higher quality optics. I've seen that in some of the discussion forums, for example, AR15.com. People talk about having gone through 2 or 3 of the replicas and then decided to just go ahead and get the real deal. Now, the replicas do come in several different configurations, just as the live models do, but on the TA3, here we can see a lot of similarities. On the Trijicon TA3, you can get it in green. But we're going to go over front to rear and side to side, and so that you can see side by side what these are looking like, because you can be thrown off if you are looking at these in person and have not seen the real deal to get a good comparison. So, at the rear, one of the things you're going to notice right away is that the real one actually has less finishing on the casting than on the replica. You'll see that the Chinese have actually put a little bit more attention into the cosmetic finishing on their unit. Later on, we're going to show you that the optics performance on the US made one is far superior. That's what you're really paying for. You're not paying for the housing to be different. The Chinese one actually comes with a smoother finish on the housing. It will come in camouflage colors. The US made one will have a little bit rougher finish overall on the housing. The US made one will have a serial number on both the front section and a rear section right here. You will see a lot of similarities here, so that if there's a rubber eye cup that would go on one, it ought to go on the other. But on the US model, this part here is a raised lip. On this, you've got a little bit of a ring arrangement, but it actually gets a little smaller back here. It's not a raised lip that's going to be able to hold on to a, let's say, a little rubber eye cup or something like that. The little Allen head screws, very similar. I believe, but I'm not certain, that on the newest model of the ACOG, they went to a Torx instead of an Allen head screw. Now let's look at the right side of the unit, and this is where you can really tell right away a real from a replica. On the real one, the name, the Trijicon ACOG, in addition to your little Bible code down here, Now, made in USA, it's embossed. That's part of the molded in stuff. That's part of the embossing. That's not printed on. On the replicas, it's printed on. And part of the reason for that is because sometimes these are sold under different brand names. And when they're sold under different brand names, they shouldn't really be putting Trijicon or ACOG on there if the quality control has not been through Trijicon corporate. Now, if the quality control, let's say, has been through Brownells or Burris or another company, they may put their own name on there, and it's printed on. And if you, let's say, you're getting a couple hundred of these made custom, you can designate a couple little variables on these, such as a little red dot that would go on top, or your own name brand, or your own camouflage pattern. You could also opt for a couple different colors of fiber optic. Red and green are the two default, but you could also get others if you're ordering to have several made. So that's a huge difference. When you look at the right side of the scope, you'll see that on the US made model, everything is embossed in. So that's going to be your quick indicator right there, is whether it's embossed or printed. Now, we go over to the left side of the scope. Things are much more similar, kind of, okay? Now, this is an older ACOG, so it doesn't have, this is an older one that's real, okay? And here we see things that are printed on. In this section right here, you might say U.S. government property, if this were a government property model, which it was not. Newer models are going to have this little square thing that's basically a website address. I'm told, but I haven't been able to verify, that on the Chinese model, that's gibberish. The little paragraph here is very similar to that on the authentic model. As this comes into focus, though, you're going to realize that they are actually using a different font when they print that on there. They're using a different font. And so, as you use this video, you should be able to see that Trijicon has a certain font. Now, this is a little bit older model. In fact, the tritium on this one is growing a little bit duller than some brand new ones I've seen. You'll also notice that the mounts are they do the same thing, but there's a couple of significant differences. One, on the Trijicon one, these are a little larger and they won't come off. The riveting style on the replica it's different. I'm not going to say it's better or worse. They both use steel on there with an aluminum base and then steel lock nuts. They don't fully lock, you just kind of run them hand tight. And then you could use a coin or a screwdriver to get that final level of tightness. However, when you look on the bottom of the Trijicon mount, you're going to see the 1913 Picatinny rail spacing right here. Now, these screws are what would correspond to your mounting positions if this were to go on a carry handle, because this is in reality an M16 carry handle adapter. Again, these scopes were originally set up to go on an M16 carry handle, and then they just started making the adapter standard after a while. But both of these stick down, okay? They stick down into the space between the rails on a 1913 rail. On the Chinese model, if you can look, you're going to see a slight offset on these. You see how this one's a little bit lower than this one? And you'll see here, this one sticks down, this one lays flat. And that is so that the Chinese model, which was intended for the sporter and airgun market, will fit on non-standard rails in addition to authentic 1913 specification rails. One of the reasons that some people will claim that's better or worse is broader compatibility, including your spacing on these two screws. As we look at on the authentic model, and we look at the spacing on these two screws is close enough. Let's get a better look at that. And the spacing is close enough that if you need to change those mounts, you may be able to. For example, in putting a ACOG on a Mini 14 or something that doesn't use the exact same style of 1913 rail, you can bugger around with the Chinese one and actually use parts of it for spare parts. The other thing I found out that you could do in using the Chinese one for spare parts is the lens caps from the Chinese one will fit the standard model. I'm sorry, not the lens cap, but the little turret caps will screw right on. The American one won't screw on deep enough onto the Chinese model. The other thing is there's a little rubber O-ring here. If it goes bad on your US model, again, you could just take the one right off the Chinese one and use it. One of the things I've been a little curious about was whether or not I would be able to use the fiber optic from one of the Chinese ones, but I really don't want to go digging this part apart to find out. The other thing I started to realize was on the US model, the front of the fiber optic is held in by a roll pin. With the Chinese one, either they have gone through some trouble to shave and conceal where the roll pin goes in, or they use some other kind of fastening method to hold that in. And these little light colored areas have me thinking they were using hot glue to hold that in. So in the next segment, I'm going to show you some of the performance differences between the two. After seeing what you saw on the video of the reticles, we can tell a little bit about what's going on here. On the real deal, there's a model designator which will show up in the bottom of the image, if we can catch that right. There it is. There it is. Okay, now it's not really coming into focus, but you'll see that little line down there. That's going to give you a model designator on these things. Also, you know, the serial number matching top and bottom on there, although you may have caught that earlier in the video. If somebody were to trace that, they would probably figure out this is a late 90s production model. And probably not military because, again, there was no NSN marking on it, no government property markings. But it appears to be one of the military specification units. The clone has a pretty good reticle in it. It's a pretty good little Stadia line type rangefinder. Although on the real deal, there's a few different reticles available. This one uses the inverted chevron, which some people consider to be nicer as far as being a little bit more compatible across a broader range of weapons. But again, there's no external bullet drop compensator on either of these. So in range determination, you kind of do that manually. The big bonus on these scopes is they're extremely robust and extremely durable. Even the clone is no punk of a scope. The lenses are kind of, armored housing here. You'll notice that there's an additional armoring ring on the inside of the clone. The green is kind of a backward reflection of the fiber optic on there. But you'll see that lens armor type thing on the inside, which keeps some of the internal lenses separated. It also restricts the amount of light that's getting through there. See, you can kind of see that. So even though you've got a 32 millimeter exit, 32 millimeter lens on there, your visible area is actually a little under that, but it's very difficult to tell through the scope because the Chinese one is a true 4-power scope. The American model is actually more like a 3.5 power scope. You'll see how the visible area, especially on this side, is wider. Okay, you see how the image, as I turn this, it goes all the way to the edge. Now, in the part that you look through, you'll barely tell the difference. It's kind of difficult to tell the camera, the scope through the camera, because both of these, your image kind of goes all the way to the edge. But if we look a little carefully, you'll realize that on the clone, it doesn't quite make it all the way to the edge when you do that little checking. On the real one, see how it goes all the way to the edge. So hopefully this has been an informative and useful video for you in telling the clones from the real deal. We'll get a little better focus on this, and you'll have a better idea of what you're buying if you happen to come across one of these in a pawn shop or a retailer, or on the used market, because there's definitely a lot of clones out there, and the clones are decent. Some are a little better than others, but when you look at the quality and to get what you pay for a thing, you are paying a premium for the authentic Trijicon product. You are not paying a premium for the name. You actually are paying a premium for higher performance.